We're not doing anything. In addition to ensuring the defendant's return to court, bail has a secondary purpose. It protects public safety. That's one of the reasons why Jeffrey Epstein was not given, well, he was a flight risk. So they were afraid that he would take off, and of course that made a lot of sense. You also don't want somebody who's dangerous, somebody who has done something to the community, murdered somebody or something. You certainly don't want to give them bail. You don't want them out on the street, and that's of course one of the reasons why you have bail, is to keep them in jail. Bail decisions are influenced by both legal factors, seriousness of the offense, and extra-legal factors, as weird as that sounds. The defendant's race and their gender. Now, what in the world would race have to do with danger? Are some people more is one race more dangerous than the other? What is the most dangerous race in the United States? All of them? Well, if you're talking about mass murders, you're talking about white people, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they're the ones with all the AR-15s and the 100-round drums.
Not to mention what they've done in history, if you want history.
That's history. That's politics. That's government. Sometimes that's just the government.
So who are the most dangerous people?
I'm sorry?
So who are the most dangerous people?
Well, according to statistics, evidently it's black males, because they're the ones that are refused bail more frequently than anybody else. Which gender is the most dangerous, males or females?
We know that it's females.
Of course, women are sugar and spice and everything nice. Everybody knows that. We've been saying that since we were 2 years old. And men are snips and snails and puppy dog tails. So you're not going to let a male out, but you can let a female out, because women are always sweet and they never do anything violent. So we'll go ahead and let the women out. Legal factors. Research has shown that bail is likely to be denied or set very high when the offense was serious and when the defendant has prior convictions, and that has a lot to do with it. How violent has this person been in the past? Extra legal factors, race and gender, have been shown to have significant impacts on judges' pretrial release decisions. For example, black defendants were less likely than other defendants to be released, and female defendants were assigned lower bail amounts than males were. So there you go. If you're a non-black female, then you're good to go. They'll just let you out almost automatically with hardly any bail. However, some people are more dangerous than others. African Americans are more dangerous than everybody else. Is that true? Well, if you watch Cops, you would believe that. But of course, if you don't watch that television show, you think that, geez, all the black people I know are really nice people. Yeah, so why in the world would you be prejudiced against them? What's wrong with them? We got a couple different groups in the United States, and for some reason, everybody just doesn't like them for some reason. The legal system just eats them alive. African Americans, for example. Why are African Americans so dangerous?
That's just what
Harley knows. Why are African Americans so dangerous?
I think they are. Perhaps
They're not? Well, why don't
It's
judges?
a certain group that think they are, I think that's what it comes down
Just a
to.
certain
They're
group.
heavily policed, so there's more crimes committed.
Well, I mean, we have to shoot them, even if they don't have our arm. We just have to shoot and kill them, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the police think we do.
That's on the police's part.
So there's a little prejudice going on.
Prejudice has.
I mean, there was
is
a white
public
dude
friends.
that was naked, and I believe he planned to harm somebody or people, and they were just chasing him.
Where are we? Here in Salem?
No, this is like in the city.
There's a naked white guy out there somewhere?
There's a guy eating another guy, but they didn't shoot him because they're both white, so cannibalism, and they're like,
The only time you shoot white people is if they're holding an AR-15.
But is it the mass shootings mostly done by white people?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
If you compare it, it's like they kill so many people in such a short
only in
time,
mass
you know.
shootings though.
No, but still, it depends on who is thinking that they are dangerous. If it's a white person thinking that, yes.
Well,
I'll say
evidently
yes,
the courts
no.
think they're more dangerous because they don't bail them out as frequently as they bail out white people. Levi thinks this is funny. Yeah, it's pretty stupid. Are black people more dangerous than anybody else? Well, anybody that's poor is more dangerous than anybody that has money. I know, so there's the most dangerous person in the room.
I think I'm fairly dangerous.
The poor people coming to the United States, and of course, when we're talking about immigrants, you're talking about people that have just spent all their money to come over here. But immigrants were thought to be very, very dangerous. I mean, and we're still hearing the same crap from Trump. I mean, he's saying that all the Mexicans coming across the border, anybody coming across the border, Hispanics coming across the border, are rapists and murderers, and they don't send us their best, they send us their worst. People have been saying that for 400 years. You guys should be saying this about all the immigrants that came across.
Nobody wants to hear that.
But that's, I mean,
It's the truth, but nobody wants to hear it.
we hated Irish, we hated the Italians, we hated all of these individuals, and they became, and we wouldn't give them jobs because there was something wrong with them. They were Irish, they were Italian, whatever, they were Jewish. So when you're talking about all of the criminals in New York or on the East Coast, you're talking about a group of individuals that started out as a denigrated group, like the Irish Mafia. Then the Italians moved in, and then we had the Italian Mafia. Then we had Jewish people moving in. Well, we had Jewish people moving in all through the time, but they couldn't find any work. So what did they do? Well, they had to turn to crime, of course. So we have this group, the poor people, the individuals who are poor, become part of the mafia. Now we have the Russian mafia in the United States, which is not pretty at all, because they're pretty brutal people. Or the Armenians, my God, you should see some of the stuff that happens in Los Angeles. The Armenians are just Vietnamese that came in after the Vietnam War. We brought thousands of Vietnamese over here, and then we wouldn't give them jobs, so they turned to crime. Well, geez, they don't mess around. Those guys just kill you. I mean, it was really horrible. So when my son was there in Los Angeles, and he was there until 2006, I think. Anyway, he was working in a bar, and of course they had these gang wars were going on, and at one point the Vietnamese gang were fighting the Armenians, and they kept finding dead bodies all over Los Angeles, either Vietnamese or Armenian, and they didn't mess around. They just butchered each other. It was horrible. Why am I talking about this? Who's the most dangerous person? Poor people are the most dangerous people. And of course, if you live in the South and you're a black male, what's the probability of finding a job? Zippo, exactly. Exactly. I was there in 1994 through 1998 in Columbus, Mississippi. I had lots of black friends, but they were all at school. If you were black and you lived and you weren't going to school, you didn't have a job. So how in the world would you ever survive? Usually off welfare and whatever money you could accumulate in one way or another, unfortunately. So that's the problem. So if you live in the South and you're black, you're SOL. You're out of luck, okay? Okay, judges tend to use a mental shortcut called matching heuristics when determining whether bail should be allowed. This is a topic that I recognize, but I'm not part of. I can't be part of it because I'm white. White people in the United States are like in charge of everything. And if I get stopped by the police, they don't give me a ticket. They don't even give me a speeding ticket. I'm too old now to get a speeding ticket too, but even back in the day when I was living up in Montana, if I had been native, they would have given me a ticket, but since I was white, they didn't give me a ticket.
They would have given you a ticket, they would have tossed you in.
That's possible.
Only because they have no jurisdiction over non-natives. There's no jurisdictional
Oh, you mean here?
here and everywhere else.
Oh, no, I wasn't on the reservation, I was off the reservation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, no, who's gonna stop you on the reservation?
For real.
Up, yeah, north. Or who's gonna stop you here?
How many times do you travel through Windsor?
Geez, I'll drive through Window Rock on Friday. Have to go to Walmart, pick up my dog food. You know, I don't pick up any food for myself, I just feed my animals. Anyway, I'll drive through Window Rock on Friday. Should I drive through really fast?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I do.
We'll clock you.
I try not to be the fastest, but I try to be faster than almost everybody else. How about that? So that's about 65, I think. You can usually go about 65 in Window Rock. Yeah. 70 coming into Window Rock, 65 while you're, from Fort Defiance all the way through until you're out of Window Rock. It's about 65. Levi's laughing. Am I going too slow? Am I going too fast? I've seen maybe 2 cops just right there. That's all I've seen. And if they're not there, why not just drive as fast as you want? Right? Wrong? Like I said, I'm not the fastest, but I'm usually the second fastest. I'm going to drive that little red car. Geez, I can go as fast as I want.
They'll stop you for anything else except for the things they should be stopping you for.
They should stop you from speeding.
Yeah, but that's.
All they need to do is patrol. All they need to do is drive back and forth, and people will slow down. That's all they need to do. They don't even have to turn the lights on. People just need to see them. That's scary. Nobody wants to get a ticket. Of course, they can't ticket me either. They could if they wanted to. Judges tend to use a middle shortcut known as matching heuristic when determining whether bail should be allowed. They search through a subset of available case information, and then they make a decision on the basis of only a small number of factors. For example, the offense severity and prior records. Anybody that is a career criminal, then they probably won't give them bail. If you've never committed a crime, no matter what it is, whether it's drug dealing or whatever, they probably will give you bail if you've never committed a crime before. Often ignoring other seemingly relevant information, of course, and that's the way judges do things. Yes, does pretrial release affect trial outcome? It does. Defendants who are detained in jail are more likely to plead guilty or be convicted and receive longer sentences than those who can afford bail, even when the seriousness of their offenses and the evidence against them are the same. Now, what does this actually tell you? This should be telling you that the more money you have, the more likely that you're going to not be convicted for your crime. The less money you have, the more likely that you're going to burn for whatever you've done. Pay optimum amounts for your crime.
So do you think if that dude Epstein, if he didn't commit suicide, what do you think would have happened if he went to trial?
This was a national case and had to do with trafficking. And this isn't the first very, very wealthy guy that has been talked about as far as trafficking is concerned. There's a lot of pissed off women in the United States right now. The Me Too movement. So I think they would have thrown the book at him. I think Epstein would have spent the rest of his life in jail. He did. He spent the rest of his life in jail. I shouldn't laugh at the fact that he committed suicide or whatever. Then maybe he was murdered in prison. What do you think? We could probably work up a conspiracy theory where he was murdered by.
Didn't Donald Trump already say that? He's already making up conspiracy theories about
About Epstein?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, if the only conspiracy theory you can come up with for Epstein would be that he's the one that murdered him. So who else would murder him?
I thought he said something about the Clintons went in there and faked his.
Oh, because Bill, yeah. Because that's, Bill rode on his
did it.
plane a couple
Mhm.
times. Okay. All right. But Epstein stayed at Trump's resort down in Florida over and over and over and over and over again. Trump wrote about it. He wrote an article about Epstein.
Saying how wonderful he is. Or...
Well, of course, he says everybody's wonderful. Or they're the most horrible person in the world. There's nobody like in between. Everybody's either really good or really bad as far as he's concerned. He speaks in hyperbole. Around 1970, can the high-risk defendants be identified? Around 1970, a push began for legislation that would increase the use of preventative detention. Something that people keep forgetting is that the owner of the New England Patriots got caught in a crackdown on trafficking in Florida. He went to a massage parlor in Miami after New England played the Miami Dolphins. He went to a massage parlor where there were women that were being trafficked. And he was caught. But people seem to be forgetting about that. For one thing, of course, it has to do with football. And everybody forgets things that happen with either football players or football owners, football team owners. So nobody's remembering that Kraft got caught in a massage parlor down in Florida. Now, why would somebody with that kind of money pull that kind of a stunt? I mean, he's got all the money in the world, he can just, well, that's what Epstein was. He was bringing girls into his apartment, underage girls into his apartment to give
So
them
did he
a...
knowingly go into this establishment knowing that those women that were in there were being trafficked?
Oh, that's the question. Oh, of course he did.
Because those are two different things.
I
You're going in
know.
there just to get a massage by people who that work there, and then you just get caught up in a raid, like, that's a shitty
I
situation.
know, it's such a sleazy place. Why would the richest guy in the
Isn't that
video?
disgusting?
Why would he go to that place for a massage? You know, his shoulder was kind of gimpy, so he
Yeah, it's a bad part of town. People seem sketchy.
exactly, sketchy, that's the word I was looking for, sketchy, that's a good one. Okay, so preventative detention, the detention of accused persons who pose a risk or flight dangerousness. This didn't start until the 1970s. Before that, getting out of jail was not the easiest thing in the world. Bail was not that common. This assumes that valid assessments of risk and accurate predictions of future dangerous conduct can be made, an assumption that is not always correct. After the 1970s, bail bondsmen became more numerous. There were people that were willing to put up your bail, and it became more common for them to offer bail after 1970. But before 1970, you're SOL. There we go, SOL again. Most criminal cases, about 90 to 95% in trial, prior to the trial with a plea bargain. And we've said that before. So most of them do not go to trial. They plea bargain before it happens. But that's in state courts, not the federal courts. Federal courts are a little bit different. Federal courts are usually publicized, more publicized. And this is kind of a problem on the reservation because you're under the jurisdiction of federal courts. not state courts. In order for you to be tried in the state of Arizona or the state of New Mexico or the state of Colorado or the state of Utah, you have to commit the crime in that state. Well, this is a sovereign country. This is a sovereign, you are a sovereign nation. And you have agreed to allow the federal government to control your court system. Kinda. Remember, there's 565, no there's not, 556, there's a 57 different tribes in the United States. There's any number of reservations in the United States, and most of them follow federal law. So if you commit a murder on a reservation, you will have to go to federal court, not to state court. It's just the way it works. In charge bargaining, the prosecutor drops some charges in return for a guilty plea. Prosecutors often overcharge to be in a good position for this. I think I told you this before. Normally in the military, if you commit a crime, you don't just commit one crime, you commit like 3 or 4 crimes. So when they take you to a court-martial, you can plea bargain. And that's normally what happens. My wife seemed to only get involved in cases where it had to do with rape or people were having sex and they shouldn't have been having sex. Usually adultery. But nobody just committed adultery or fornication. They always committed sodomy. They always charged them with 3 or 4 different things. And then they would plea bargain it down to one charge. Usually the rape or whatever. It's the only place in the United States where adultery is against the law. You can have sex with anybody you want, pretty much. But in the military, if you have sex with the wrong person, they can charge you with fornication. They can charge you. It's in the UCMJ, so they can charge you with all these really strange things, just for having sex with the wrong person. So who is the wrong person? Well, everybody's the wrong person, as it turns out. If they've been drinking, you can't you can't seduce somebody that's been drinking. When they take that first drink, the sex is suddenly off the table. As soon as they swallow that first drink. That's the law in the military. Plea bargaining, plea bargaining may also take the form of sentence bargaining, in which prosecutors recommend reduced sentences in return for a guilty plea. In general, judges will follow the sentences recommended by the prosecutor, so they make a deal. Now, a lot of people get pissed off about this because they'll say, we're not going to charge you with first-degree murder. Instead, we'll charge you with second-degree murder. You'll spend 10 to 15 in jail. So you got a murderer that potentially is an assassin, and he'll go to jail. And if he's a good boy, he'll probably get out in 5 years. And they wanted to charge him with first-degree murder. Now, could they have convicted him of first-degree murder? That's the question. Why do defendants plead guilty? Because the likelihood of conviction is high. Because if convicted, they would face lengthy sentences. And of course, that's what you're doing. You're gambling that it's not going to be as bad as you thought it was going to be. So why do prosecutors plea bargain? For one thing, you never know how evidence is going to be accepted, or what evidence is going to be thrown out of court. So you have a certain amount of evidence against the defendant. So what's the possibility that all that evidence is going to be accepted, and how much of it is circumstantial? I mean, especially if you have a formidable defense attorney, then the likelihood of you of the guy getting off is fairly high. If they plea bargain, they win. Just ask Donald Trump. He's been to court. He's still in court. He's still in court being sued for this, that, and the other. Usually it has to do with his properties. He's gone bankrupt 3 times. Why am I saying bad things about the president? But
He's a good one.
he's a good target. He never loses in court because he plea bargains. And he never admits he's wrong. He's never admits his crime. And that's one of the reasons why this whole impeachment thing is going to go all the way to the wall. Because he never admits that he did anything wrong. Even when it's right there in black and white, just like this telephone conversation. I mean, it's right there. It says right there. Oh, I got, but you have to do me a favor though. Okay, wait a minute, that's not right. Anyway.
Isn't he being sued? I don't know if it was being sued by an adult filmmaker or actress kind of person.
No, she dropped her suit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the stripper?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
she's not a stripper. She's
I'm sorry, she's a porn star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Female porn star.
she had that whole thing.
Stormy
With,
Daniels.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
just
that
heard
was
about
a-
it.
Don't look it up. Her name's Stormy Daniels. Stormy
So it's
Daniels.
being accused.
But that's not all. There was also a Playboy bunny that he was having an affair with. Okay.
This is our president.
I know, he's our president. We should be proud of him. He's sexually active. To obtain the testimony of one defendant against a more culpable defendant, of course. And of course, that's what they can do. Prosecutors can use evidence that they gain from in one case to try somebody else, to get somebody else. That's normally what happens when they, with the drug deals. They've got somebody on the street, so what they'll do is they'll get them to turn state's evidence against the person, their supplier. And that's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to stop the supply. So they don't really want to convict this guy as bad. They want to get him off the street, but they also want to catch the supplier so that they can stop the supply of drugs coming into the United States. And of course, to expedite the flow of cases. The fewer cases that they have to see, the more likely that they will be able to get the cases fairly rapidly. This is Shane Guthrie. This is Shane Guthrie. When he was 24 years old, he was arrested in Gainesville, Florida in 2010, and he was charged with aggravated battery and false imprisonment on his pregnant girlfriend. He took her away when she didn't want to go. Kidnapping. And they didn't charge him with kidnapping, they charged him with false imprisonment. In other words, he locked her in the house and wouldn't let her out. Guthrie was initially offered a plea deal of 2 years in prison and probation. Guthrie refused. He didn't want to spend 2 years in jail. He's only 24 years old. The prosecutor then offered him 5 years and he declined. It's going to get worse. The prosecutor couldn't get Guthrie to plead guilty, so a year later he filed first-degree felony kidnapping charges, life imprisonment if convicted. He went from 2 years in prison to 50 years in prison because he wouldn't take the plea deal. This lady's pregnant, she's having her baby right now. That's why this circle is around her. She's about to have the baby. It's coming out. Doesn't look too distressed, but and that's what he did. She didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore, and that's why he kidnapped her and put her and imprisoned her. Framing effects: the way decision alternatives are framed, gains or losses can have an impact on a person's choice. Individuals are more willing to take chances with the decision alternatives are presented in terms of gains than in terms of losses. This is what you gain if you plea bargain. You gain 3 years of life because otherwise we'll convict you and you will go to jail for 5 years. If you accept a plea deal, you'll only go to jail for 2 years. So you gain 3 years. And if you're good, you'll get out in 18 months instead of 2 years. Individuals are more willing to take chances when the decision alternatives are presented in terms of gains and losses. Overconfidence bias, people tend to be too optimistic about their chances of securing favorable outcomes. And of course, we like to be positive, but unfortunately, of course, sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Advocates cite the following jurisdictions for plea bargaining. Guilty pleas relieve the backlog of cases. They facilitate the prosecution of other offenders. The absence of a trial reduces the involvement of various criminal justice personnel. So the more plea bargaining we can do, the less, it reduces the number of people that we have to get involved with the case, investigators and whatnot. We're always looking for more evidence because you never can have enough evidence against somebody. So plea bargaining is a good deal for everybody involved. It's a good deal for the person that committed the crime because probably he will plead down from a fairly serious charge to a less serious charge. So it's good for everybody involved. Critics cite the following justifications for plea bargaining. Improper sentences sometimes are too harsh, but more often are too lenient. They are more likely. The process encourages defendants to surrender their constitutional rights. This is a problem because if you are convicted of a felony, and of course if you plea bargain, then you have a conviction. You have pled guilty. You have to plead guilty in order to plea bargain. You pled guilty and now you're a felon. And if you're a felon, you can't vote. You can't maintain firearms in most states. There's a couple states where you can. But in most states, you're not allowed to have firearms. So you give up your constitutional rights. One of them is you can't vote. And the other one is you can't have a gun. And of course, if you, unfortunately, if you are found with a weapon and you are and you have plea bargained and you're a felon, then you committed another crime and now they'll put you in prison for a while. Prosecutors exert too much power, of course. Prosecutors are the ones that decide who is and who isn't going to be to have a plea bargain. They're the ones that decide what the plea bargain is going to be. So if they like somebody, then if they're a good person, a white person. If they're a wealthy person, they're more likely to give them probation or something. But if there's somebody they don't like, a minority, then probably the plea bargain won't be such a good deal for them. And so the prosecutors have just too much power. Of course, we elect our prosecutors. These are our district attorneys. Those are our prosecutors. We elect these guys, and then they hire other attorneys. But do we ever think about this? I mean, no, of course not. We never even heard of any of these people. They don't politic. They don't come and give speeches. Nobody has a clue who they are. You either pick the Republican or the Democrat. That's usually the way it is. Or maybe there's an independent running. Who votes for independence? Hardly anybody votes for independence. So if you're a Democrat, you'll pick the Democrat. If you're a Republican, you pick the Republican, and you have no clue what kind of a jackass this person is. If he's a Republican, he's probably conservative. Therefore, he's probably a little bit more stringent as far as laws are concerned. If he's a Democrat, he's probably a little bit more liberal, but you never know. He may think that anybody that speeds should be thrown in jail for a year, have their license taken away. You never know. Geez, what if they do that? I'll lose my license almost right away. Anyway, so prosecutors have too much power. Innocent defendants might feel coerced to plead guilty, and of course, they do plead guilty. And unfortunately, they will be coerced to plead guilty. Sometimes it pisses them off, the prosecutors, so they throw the book at them. They throw the book at them because they won't play ball. It pisses them off, so they convict them. And of course, if they've got evidence, whether the evidence is circumstantial or not, it does go to trial, it goes to the jury. If they get a favorable jury, then potentially they can put somebody in jail for a really, really long time who is innocent. The vast majority of civil disputes are resolved without trial. For example, settlement negotiation, this is usually the way Donald Trump gets out of his lawsuits. Typically in private negotiations between attorneys representing the disputing parties. So it's usually your lawyer versus their lawyer. Now Trump brags about this all the time, the fact that he had the best lawyer in New York City. So he's never convicted of anything. It was a guy by the name of Cohen. I can't remember his first name. Ralph, I think. This is his first name. Anyway, he was his lawyer. He was his dad's lawyer too. His father was a multi-millionaire. What did Trump say yesterday? Oh, he's lost between $2 and $5 billion being president of the United States. Let's all cry for Donald Trump and his lost billions of dollars.
So he's been playing pencil in a second.
Don't cry. He'll be all right. He'll make more money when he gets out of office. The legal merits of the case matter most. In civil cases, outcomes are also influenced by the negotiator's reservation price. The defendant's reservation price is the maximum amount of money that he or she would be willing to pay to reach an agreement. The plaintiff's reservation is the minimum amount of money that he or she would accept to settle the claim. And this is really the way it works. The plaintiff has a figure, and the defendant has a figure, and they have to negotiate. They have to figure out how much money they're actually going to pay. This has happened to Trump tons of times. People will come in and they will do his building for him. They'll construct his casino or whatever he's building, or his Trump Tower or whatever. They'll put in marble fixtures or whatever. And they will charge him whatever they have agreed on, like $1.5 million to put in marble fixtures. And then Trump will say, no, I'm not going to pay you. So they have to go to court, and then everything is negotiated. So Trump will say, I'm not going to pay you more than $100,000. That's really shoddy work. And then he insults them and tells them what horrible people they are. And they say, but you agreed to pay $1.5 million. No, that's not going to happen. So then they negotiate, and he ends up paying $750,000 or whatever. So he got cut in half. He got the amount of money that he had to pay. So people don't like to work for him. Other businessmen do not like to work for him. As strange as that is, I guess it's not that strange. In considering the merits of case, plaintiffs, defendants, and attorneys are influenced by heuristics. The self-serving bias occurs when people interpret information or make decisions in ways that are consistent with their own interests rather than in an objective fashion. Parties often have difficulty seeing the merits of the other side, and of course, as far as, and I hate to pick up, no I don't, he fits so well with this class. We can talk about him all day long, strangely enough. If somebody says something bad about him, boy, he just jumps all over the place. Mitt Romney. Who else did he attack here today? He called Nancy Pelosi a third-rate politician. Well, I'm not exactly sure what a first or second-rate politician is, but he called her a third-rate politician. You know, this was at a meeting, and he had his whole cabinet was sitting on one side, and everybody else was on the other side. They were talking about Syria, about the fact that he pulled out his troops, and then the Turks attacked the Kurds, which doesn't sound too bad, does it?
As long as we're not the ones doing it.
As long as we're not the ones being killed, we're okay.
We're all right.
All right. So let's just go ahead and kill those Kurds, damn it. Who cares? They're Kurds. Do you know anything about Kurds? You don't? They're Sufis. Okay. There's two major groups in the Muslim religion. There's two major groups, the Sunnis and the Shias. The Sufis are mystics. They believe in mysticism. They're the ones that do the spin around in circles until they go into a trance. Yeah, those are Sufis. Anyway, the Kurds are Sufis. They don't always cover their women like the Sunni and the Shia do. They're different. And they're actually a different ethnic group than the Iraqis and the Syrians and the Turks. You know, all of these people are different groups. They're different tribes, I guess you could say, but they don't look alike. I mean, if you look at them, they don't look anything alike. If you've ever been to Turkey, the Turks are fairly light complexion. But if you wander down into Iraq and Afghanistan, or not Afghanistan, let's not go there. Let's go to Iran.
So the Kurds are the indigenous peoples of southeastern Turkey, northeastern Syria,
I don't know.
northern Iraq.
I don't know.
So they're indigenous to their land.
Well, they consider themselves indigenous, but the Iranians don't like them. Nobody likes them. Nobody likes them except we liked them because they were willing to fight instead of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of us having to put thousands of troops in Syria, the Kurds were right there anyway, and they were really good allies. They were really good fighters. The problem is that they do have terrorist groups. There are terrorist groups in Turkey, and that's why the Turks don't like them, because they're trying to carve out their own territory, and that's what Erdogan said to Trump. This is all international politics. This is international politics that goes back hundreds of years. This ain't just yesterday afternoon they suddenly got pissed off at each other. The Kurds have been trying to create their own territory for an extended length of time. And sometimes they call it Kurdistan, but there is no actual Kurdistan. Yeah. It's just an area where almost all Kurds live. Now the problem is that when the Turks crossed the border into Syria, that area that they invaded, the Kurds have been there for a really long time, for hundreds of years, maybe probably. What happens with the Kurds is that they become mercenaries. So the Iraqis will hire them to attack the Iranians, or the Syrians will not hire them. They will allow them to fight somebody else. And of course they get guns and ammunition and whatever. And they've been playing this game for hundreds of years anyway. But they fought for us, so that should make us happy with them, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, if they fought for us, shouldn't we, like, support them? Or not? Or should we just, what is it?
Is it one of those, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back?
Yeah, I guess, and they scratched our back, and now we're just, going, oh, I don't know, this one, do that. I made a deal, you fought for us, and you died, and now I'm gonna let somebody else kill you.
Pretty much.
I know that we're trivializing the whole situation. The anchoring of the adjustment bias occurs when negotiators are strongly influenced, anchored by an initial starting value, and do not sufficiently adjust their judgments away from the starting point. One of the oil companies, one of the fracking companies, has just been sued for like $265 million, and they lost. Yeah, $265 million. Anyway, they lost. And so that was the judgment, $265 million. Now the reality is they'll never pay $265 million. It's not the way it works. They will go to the appeals court, which they have all the right in the world to do that. And then when they lose, they'll go to another appeals court. And then when they lose, they'll go to another appeals court. And they'll string this thing out for years. So the defendants are never going to get, they are the defendants.
Isn't that how Trump handles all of his cases?
Yeah, that's how he handles all of his cases. So he never loses.
So you keep appealing your case
Until you get tired or you run out of money. Because all of these appeals, you have to go to court too. So you have to hire a lawyer that is willing to go to court for an extended length of time. Okay. Remember I said, at one point I said, we're not really looking for the truth, we're looking for to win the case. We're looking for justice. Court cases are not always after the truth. The higher the first offer, the higher the ultimate settlement usually. So now we're working with $265 million. We'll see how much that goes down in time. Miller and Boaster in 1977 have identified 3 images of a trial. The trial is a search for the truth is the first one we're going to talk about. This assumes the truth can be ascertained and that it will emerge from the confrontation of conflicting facts. The reality is, if something happens, if Levi and I get into a fist fight, he probably just about kills me, but if that happens, there is truth as far as I'm concerned, and there's truth as far as he's concerned. As far as he's concerned, I attacked him.
And you provoked it.
Yeah, and I was the one that provoked it. As far as I'm concerned, he was the aggressor, and I was trying to defend myself. And so which is the truth?
You provoked Levi.
You provoked it.
We all saw
You're
Bruce.
the only person in this.
The shortest one's the one that starts it.
Old people can't start a fight, can they? And it's elder abuse. Levi, I'm over 70 years old, so I'm 70 in a week, so be careful who you start punching. It also assumes that judges or jurors can put aside their prejudices and decide the case with a dispassionate analysis of the arguments and evidence. If you ever want to see a really good movie with just a ton of really good actors, 12 Angry Men, they made the movie in 2 days. I mean, it was amazing. It's got some of the best actors who have ever existed are in that movie. But that's the way it really works. Now this kid, theoretically, this kid stabbed the old man and robbed him. I don't know if he killed the old man or not, but they were about to convict him because he was Hispanic, and they didn't like Hispanic kids. Well, I mean, when you're dealing with a jury, you've got all those prejudices are involved in their decision. There's prejudices, there are preconceived notions, there are pieces of evidence that are not allowed to come out because the judge has decided that they can't come out. So are we really looking for the truth or not? We're not really talking about a policeman who is wandering around finding all the evidence. That's not what the jury is. The jury is only allowed to see select pieces of evidence. So are we really finding the truth? Is a question that you have to ask yourself. Of course, it's very difficult to meet this ideal, and there's always 2 ways of looking at things. Now there's all of a sudden there's 4 because we've got, or 5, because we've got the judge, we've got the prosecuting attorney, we've got the defense attorney, we've got the defendant, and we've got the prosecution group. So we've got 5 different people, 5 different perspectives on one piece of on one situation. What just happened? Something just happened with an oil company. No, it's a gold company. It's a mining company up in Alaska. The mine is on the bank of a very fragile river up in Alaska. And they're trying to decide whether they should allow them to mine or not. If they do mine, one of the problems with mining is the best way to get gold out of the ground is to wash it out. But washing it out means that you have to spray water and cyanide into the area. That's the best way to disclose the gold. So you have to contaminate the area with cyanide.
Sounds very familiar to San Juan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really? Is that what they did in San Juan?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's what they did up in Montana on the Fort Belknap Reservation. They were using cyanide leaching in order to get the gold out. There was gold, but the best way to get it out was to soak all the rocks in cyanide and water. Now, they were supposed to be catching all the cyanide in water. They're supposed to be catching it and putting it, I don't know what they were thinking they were going to do. But they're catching all this cyanide in water. And then the plastic, the bisqueen cracked or something. And of course, it's cold up there. My God. And it's plastic. They're trying to keep it in the plastic. Anyway, it cracked and it leaked into the water supply. Now there's cyanide all over the reservation.
So isn't cyanide an acid?
It is. It's an acid.
So they put it in plastic.
Cyanide? Well, not anymore. They're not supposed to. They're not supposed to put cyanide in.
But that's what happens, though, they put it in a plastic.
They put it in a plastic container. Yeah, it was supposed to keep it in a holding pond. Okay. It sounds like what happened here as well. Why are we talking about this? I can't remember. I lost my train of thought.
So did they get sued by the reservation?
Yes, they did, by golly, and then they immediately declared bankruptcy. They don't exist anymore.
So what is the water supply like now on the reservation?
Well, close to the mine, it's pretty bad because there's a lot of cyanide. Cyanide, I don't know if you've ever seen it, it's yellow. So you can't dig a well. Not that close to the mine anyway. This is up on the top of the mountain. It's worse than that. It's worse than you can possibly imagine because these are the Little Rocky Mountains, and they were owned by the tribe, and it was Spirit Mountain that they were gold mining. The reason they were able to mine there is because in 1889 the federal government said either you give us this mountain or we won't give you any food. Kind of like what Trump was saying to the Ukrainians. And so they had a choice. They either gave up a chunk of their territory or they wouldn't eat that winter. There weren't any buffalo left, they were all gone. So they gave up the mountain, Spirit Mountain. I know, it's really kind of sad. So if you drive past there, you can see all these peaks, and then all of a sudden there's just this divot. And that's where Spirit Mountain used to be. They chopped the top off of it, and they mined it, and they got a ton of gold out of it. Now the sad part is that the company that were doing the mining, it was a Canadian company. That's not that sad, I guess. So all that gold that came out of that mountain went up to Canada. And then when they made a mistake, it went away, or the company went away. The company dissolved, so they couldn't sue it. They didn't have anybody to sue. So nobody owns the mine anymore.
So apparently, most Native Americans and Navajos just happen to live in the best place to mine, have a lot of valuable resources.
Why is that? Why the hell would they move you guys to well, you've always been here. But why is that? I mean, they allowed the Growan and the Assiniboine to live on a chunk of land up in Montana. And at one time, they owned the whole area.
Because they thought this was a desert area.
Exactly,
and that
exactly.
we wouldn't be able to survive.
It was the shittiest place they could find. That's why they moved you there. And it turns out that that's where you find gold, uranium. That's where all the good stuff is. So, but they moved you to these places before they were even thinking about strip mining, and the uranium hadn't even been discovered. They did the same thing with what was that group of Indians that lived in Oklahoma? They gave them a chunk of land, and then it turned out that it was a huge pool of oil underneath. And so they all became millionaires. They're the richest people in the world for like 30 years. And in the end, by the time that 30 years was over, most of them were dead. People had murdered them for their monies. No, it's horrible. That's not a happy story. Yeah, Levi's crying in the back. You'll be okay.
Well, what sucks is being Native American and knowing all these issues, and you go to a university off the reservation And this happened with the university that I went to at Southern Utah University, and you're just a chapter in history,
Exactly.
and it's like,
They want to pretend you don't exist.
I couldn't, it was like, but they want to talk about Ellis Island and Columbus and
Sure.
all this other stuff, and it's like, but, I mean, I don't know what the thought process is for, white people, but, I mean, previous to 1492, if you can show me documentation that you were here, I mean, you're pretty much illegal as well. I'm talking about all
Oh, you mean all the immigrants?
the immigrants.
All the
I mean,
immigrants. Okay.
and that's just one issue. And then there's the issue about the land, and right now with Bears Ears and how that whole thing's going on with Trump, and just, you know, those Native American artifacts and pretty much our history. You know, like,
Right.
it's pretty
You're right.
crappy.
Sure it is. How would you like to teach history?
It would just.
When all the
you
history
know,
just ignores all this
I would
stuff.
become violent because.
Well, I mean-
I'm not gonna sit there and just be quiet and be like,
History needs to
okay.
be retaught.
But like, that's just, you know, it's different when you're talking US history with a Native American
Right.
than, you know, as opposed to being in a situation where you're non-native and you're teaching it to a class of non-natives.
Right.
Like, it's an interesting setting to be in because I was there, you know.
It's weird because I had a really good friend who taught Native American studies up in Billings, Montana, to Indians. And he was the Jewish guy from New York City. And then right down the road was the Montana State University Northern, which is in Havre. And Native American Studies, I mean, there's a reservation on one side of Havre, and there's a reservation on the other side of Havre. And at the University of Montana State University in Havre, the professor was from Finland, teaching Native American studies. Now, what sense does that make? I mean, where's the logic there? The guy at Billings, he did all of his studies down here on this reservation, and he's up in Montana teaching Native American studies. They've got 7 reservations in Montana, but he's teaching about the only people he knows about are the Navajo, because that's where he got his education, down here. And he's a Jewish guy from New York City.
I was telling Bradway that my little brother is going to school in Kansas, and he messaged me saying that he was in a class where they're teaching about Native American history for a little bit. He said he almost got up, went out and cried because he's the only Navajo there. And he said the way they were teaching it and how he was explaining to 300 kids, and he was like, they made it sound like they did us a favor, like it was okay to kill us and make us believe in Christianity and all these other religions. How he was just preaching it to everybody. He was like, he wanted to get up and say, that's not how it is. And he was like, I don't have water and I don't have electricity. How can you guys say this? But, you know, he's only Navajo there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of scary for him to say that when it's just him.
He's not at Haskell, is he? Is he at Haskell? Haskell used to be a boarding school, and now it's a university, of course. It's an AHAC school. But how in the world are you going to teach Native American studies at Haskell when you've got representatives from everywhere? I mean, natives from everywhere. I mean, what do they concentrate on? My wife took Native American Studies 101 when she was in Oklahoma. You know what she learned? She learned about the 5 civilized tribes, because those were the 5 primary.
Six heritage tribes.
No, 5 civilized tribes were the guys in the southeast. Iroquois are up northeast. They're in the northeast. Iroquois were up north. These are the 5 civilized tribes that they kicked out of the southeast. The Seminole, the Creek, Choctaw, Cherokee, yeah, and Chickasaw. And that's all she learned about. And she thought, well, this isn't right. You know, the Comanche are right over there, and here we're talking about Native American studies. The only ones we're learning about are the ones that took the Trail of Plead. There's just a lot of different perspectives, tons of different perspectives.
It's frustrating.
I know. So we can't lose sight of these things. I mean, we need to understand these things. I mean, I'm here and I should be talking about Navajos, but of course, I was up north, so I talk about the people up north too. Yes, ma'am.
To add in with the whole university experience stories, you know, my sister, she's currently at a university here in Arizona, and my sister and I are both half Navajo and mixed ethnicities on our father's side. And we do not look alike. My sister looks very different from me. She represents more.
She's
her-
pretty?
Yeah,
I'm
she's
just-
more beautiful. She's taller. No, she's white. You know, my sister is white, you know, but she's Navajo. You know, so when she's sitting there, you know, in world religions, you know, is what she's in right now in one of the classes. And she was texting me the other day, and she was like, oh my God, I cannot stand some of these students standing up there with their presentations like they know what the hell they're talking about. She's like, here they are in the classroom talking about the border wars and what everyone's going through, and yet none of them have ever even been or put themselves in that situation to even know firsthand what it feels like to be there.
Right.
You know, and I just told her, you know, like, just chill out, you know, just calm down, be strong in who you are. You know your upbringing, you know, it's like you and I are very fortunate that our mother brought us back home to the reservation and brought us to be raised amongst our people, to know what it's like to go through the struggles of Native Americans that we know that side. We're fortunate enough to know that side, you know, so it's like, just play your white card, you know, but, you know, with what you do with your writing, you tell the truth there. You know, you put everything on black and white right there, so that way, that's something that you can use to teach them something when it comes to you presenting something to them. Because only you know what you've been through. They only can dream about what it must be like
Right.
to skip a shower, you know, and they intentionally skip showers. They intentionally not take care of their hygiene, you know, and she's like, and here I am. She's like, here I am, half Navajo. She's like, and I'm wearing deodorant. I showered today. I brushed my teeth. I make sure I eat well. She's like, and here these people are. They have all the privilege in the world, and yet they don't even want to grasp it or take it and do something good with it, even just for themselves. You know, so and I was like, see, that's your strength right there. That's right there. Keep that with you and use that right there in class and teach the rest of those students exactly what it means to be Native American. You know, and at the end of the semester, it's like, reveal that you're not white. You know, reveal that you're Navajo.
Right.
You know? Yeah. So I was like, and she knows how to speak Navajo as well, you know, so, and she understands Navajo too, you know, which is something that they don't have, and they probably will never grasp that understanding, no matter how many books they read, no matter how many movies they watch, no matter how many sweat lodges or ceremonies they participate in. I was like, they can't get it.
The bottom line is that you need to be true to yourself, really. And
Yes.
as long as you can be true to yourself, then no matter what bullshit, let me turn this on.